Hi, I'm John Gilstrap, author of the Jonathan Grave thriller series, back again with another peek inside a writer's life and the publishing industry. Today, what I want to talk about is how do writers get paid? How do authors get paid? As a practical matter, we make our living off of royalties of the books that we sell. In the traditional publishing model, which is not to be confused with the self-publishing model, those royalties, whatever the percentage is, and it's always tied to cover price, whatever those royalties are negotiated amounts. That's what the negotiation between the agent and the editor is all about in the early stages. But as a practical matter, you can't collect royalties until there have been sales. And if you consider that there's always a lag time, if I sell a new book, if I finish a book and I sell it to a publisher today, it won't be out for at least a year. So what publishers will offer to the authors are advances against royalties. You hear about these in the news. So-and-so just signed a $100,000 advance for a 3-book deal with publisher X. Well, what that advance is designed to do is to give some working capital to the writer during the time that he's producing that manuscript or a future manuscript. It's money that you can spend today, but it's against the royalties that you will collect in a year or 2 years or whenever the royalty checks start coming in or don't start coming in. If the book does not sell well and the royalties, in fact, never earn out the advance, that's the term, to earn out the advance, well, the writer still gets to keep that advance, doesn't have to give that money back. So the publisher is taking all of the risk in that circumstance. So here's how advances actually work. Let's say, and these again are all negotiated numbers. These are not industry norms. I have no idea what industry norms are, but just for illustrative purposes and to keep the math simple. Here's how it works. Let's say that author Jones signs a $100,000 3-book deal. That would make the news. $100,000 is really a good size advance in this day and age, unless you're one of the superstar authors, in which case you're probably not watching this. But when you hear that it's a $100,000 advance for 3 books, what it really is $33,333 3 times, or some breakdown of that amount. It's not $100,000 per book, it's $100,000 split over 3 books. So the way that would be paid, assuming that, again, these are all negotiated, we're going to keep it simple. Let's say that the terms of the contract are that the author will get 50%, 50% of the advance upon signing, and then the other 50% on DNA, delivery and acceptance of the manuscript. So on the first day, when they sign the contract, that author would get 50% of each of the 3 books, $33,333, right? So the author will get $50,000 on that day, and that keeps him going. When he submits that manuscript for the first book, he'll make another $16,666. I had to do the math over here, which would be the other half of the advance for the first book. But they will still him, and then when he submits the second manuscript a year from now or 2 years from now, he gets another $16,666, and like that, until you've earned out the entire $100,000, minus the commissions for the agent. Now, a little bit, it used to be that writers got much bigger advances. The big name writers got much bigger advances than they do today. And when I first started in this 20 years ago, the metrics were the bigger the advance, the more dedicated the publisher would be to making sure that your book would be successful because they've got more money at stake. And there is some truth to that. However, if a writer gets a big advance and the book does not live up to expectations, in other words, and let's say in the model we just set up, we've paid the writer $33,333 for that first book. And again, for simplicity's sake, let's say that he earns a $1 royalty for every book that is sold. Well, and the reality is it's a little bit more than $1 for a hardcover. It's a little less than $1 for paperbacks, mass market paperbacks, but it's a good number to work with. So if he gets $1 per book as a royalty, he will have to sell 33,333 books before he gets another dime in royalties, because all of those royalties on actual sales go to earn out his advance. So if he doesn't do that, if he only sells 20,000 copies, well, it's the publisher that's out the 13 grand on that book. And nobody likes to be burned. They really don't like to be burned. And what will happen on the bookstore level is, in anticipation of a big book from publisher X, the bookstores will order in large numbers. Well, bookstores get to return unsold books for a full credit, but it still costs them money because shelf space is money. It's kind of a complex metric. But if book one undersells by 13,000 copies, well, the bookstores are going to order fewer books on the second book, and now the publisher is going to lose more money. So when you're calculating, when you start dreaming about having a big advance, think of the downside. If that advance had been for $10,000 for one book, the author would have made $5,000 on signing, and then he would have to sell. He'd get another $5,000 on submission of the manuscript for a total of 10, and he would have had to sell 10,000 copies in order to earn out, and everybody in the food chain will be happy. So the whole business of big advance versus little advance, there are a lot of moving parts in here, and I know a number of authors who have gotten themselves caught in a crack by insisting on an advance that way outstripped their ability to earn out, and it can be very career damaging. So that's what an advance is. It's sort of like a draw if you're in sales, but you never have to owe it back. The only way you ever owe an advance back is if you accept the money and then you don't submit a publishable manuscript. And there have been some cases there where the miscalculation was so bad that, as a practical matter, from the publisher's point of view, the author couldn't possibly submit a publishable manuscript, and then he ends up being let go. And according to the contract language, he may or may not owe that advance money back. All right, so that's a little bit of a peek into the money side of things. Please keep reading. Y'all take care of yourselves. I'm John Gilstrap.